August
This
2nd,
is the key. Take it.
1936.
Why me?
Bakersfield,
You're the
California.
only one I trust.
107
understand.
degrees by noon. Silas Brennan had 47 copper pennies spread across a table that leaned left because the fourth leg had rotted through last winter.
Is that the full
He
amount?
counted them 6
Yes,
times already.
every last coin and bill.
They still
Good.
added up
We
to the
can't
same
afford any
impossible
errors.
mathematics. 47 cents, $4,700 in debt, 72 hours, 3 days until Friday
right,
at 5
get this
o'clock
one clear.
before Montgomery
Got
Voss
it.
came
Hand
for
it
his
over.
father's farm.
Careful with that edge.
The pennies were warm to the touch. Everything was warm. The air tasted like copper and dust in the particular flavor of hope dying slow. His hands shook when he tried to stack the coins. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that. The tremor lived in his bones since France, since the trenches, since the Guerrillas. 18 years later, and his body still remembered what his mind tried to forget. The house remembered too. Every board, every nail, every inch of this 40-acre inheritance carried the weight of better days. His father had built this place in 1889 with gold rush money that ran out before the gold did. Solid oak beams, river stone foundation, windows facing east to catch morning sun before the heat turned savage. Now the oak was dry as tinder, the stone cracking. The windows caught nothing but the advancing edge of the Dust Bowl, that slow-motion apocalypse eating America from the inside out. Silas touched the brass key hanging from a leather cord around his neck. Old habit. The key was warm too, warmed by his skin by the relentless California sun coming through gaps in the roof where shingles had surrendered. The key didn't open anything, not anymore. It had belonged to Jackson Cole, best friend, foxhole companion. The man who died in Silas's arms in a trench outside Verdun in 1918, choking on mustard gas, pressing this key into Silas's hand with fingers that couldn't quite close. "Tell my father," Jackson had whispered, each word costing everything. "Vault, Denver, he'll know." Then Jackson stopped being Jackson and started being just another body in a war that ground up men like wheat through a thresher. Silas survived. He wasn't sure that was the same thing as living. After the war, he'd found Jackson's father in Denver. The old man wept when Silas handed him the key, then wept harder, explaining the family vault had been emptied in 1920, sold to pay debts Jackson never knew existed. "Keep it," Jackson's father had said. "It don't open nothing now, but it meant something once. Maybe it'll mean something again." That was 1919, 17 years of carrying a key to nowhere. Silas was still touching it when he heard the sound. Footsteps. Coming up the dirt road from town. Heavy footsteps that kicked up dust, with each step leaving small clouds hanging in superheated air. His body reacted before his mind caught up. Muscles tensing, breath catching, the same response that kept him alive in France and haunted him since. Fight or flight, frozen in the perpetual middle distance of neither. He moved to the window, glass so dust-covered it looked frosted. Through the haze, he saw 2 figures approaching. Women, walking like they'd been walking for days. Clothes the color of Oklahoma dirt, that particular red-brown, marking the refugees, the Okies, the Dust Bowl displaced. Clothes that started as something else, maybe blue, work dresses, maybe calico prints, but dust had claimed them like it claimed everything. They were 30 yards out when one stumbled. Not a trip, a collapse, legs giving out, body folding like someone cut the strings. The other woman's sister, maybe her friend, caught her before she hit ground. Barely. Both went down in a controlled fall tangle of dusty fabric and 2 thin limbs in desperation. Silas moved before deciding to move. The door stuck, always stuck. Wood swollen and warped made a sound like dying every time you tried opening it. He put his shoulder into it, felt it give, stumbled into heat that hit like a fist. The sun was a white hole in bleached out sky. No clouds, no mercy. Just relentless hammer of light turning everything to variations of pale and faded and done. He was halfway to them before the conscious woman looked up. Twins. They were twins, identical down to hollows under cheekbones, cracked lips, eyes that had seen too much and braced for more. Mid-20s maybe? Hard to tell. Poverty and the road aged you in ways having nothing to do with years. The conscious one had her sister cradled in her lap, hand on the unconscious woman's throat, checking pulse with shaking fingers. "Water," she said, not asking, stating, like she'd used up all her asking somewhere between here and wherever they'd come from. Silas didn't answer, just turned and ran back. The pump was around back. Took him 11 strokes to get it primed. He counted, because counting kept panic at bay. Water came up rust-colored, at first always did, then cleared to something almost drinkable. He filled the tin cup living on the pump post, then ran back. The woman in dirt hadn't moved. Her sister stroked her hair, whispering something Silas couldn't hear. Prayer, maybe, or promise. The universal language of, please don't die, he knelt, ground hot enough to hurt through threadbare trousers. He held out the cup. The conscious twin took it with both hands like something precious, like the first kindness she'd seen in a while. She lifted her meister's head, pressed cup to cracked lips, tilted it slow. Most water went in. Some spilled down the unconscious woman's chin, cutting tracks through dust on her skin. Beneath the dirt, she was pale. Too pale. Heat exhaustion, probably. Maybe heat stroke. Maybe worse. How long has she been walking? Silas heard himself ask. The conscious twin looked at him. Really looked. Her eyes were the color of creek water, back when creeks still had water. Something between brown and green and gray. 6 days, she said. 2 words containing multitudes. 6 days walking in August heat. 6 days of doors closing. 6 days of being Okies in California, which was about the same as being vermin in a church. The woman in dirt made a sound. Not quite consciousness, but heading there. Her eyelids fluttered. Lips moved. Pearl, she whispered. I'm here, Opal. The conscious twin Pearl pressed cup to her sister's lips again. Drink, slow now. Small sips. Opal drank. Her eyes opened. Same impossible color as Pearl's. Twin mirrors reflecting the same hard road. She tried sitting up. Pearl held her down. Give it a minute, Pearl said. You fainted. We don't have a minute. Opal's voice was raw. You need to not die. Pearl looked at Silas. Is there somewhere she can rest? Just a few minutes, somewhere out of the sun. Silas thought about the house, about 47 pennies on the crooked table, about the eviction notice Deputy Wade Palmer had delivered that morning, typed neat and legal on paper that might as well have been a death certificate. Thought about Jackson Cole dying in his arms. Thought about Jackson's father weeping over a key opening. Nothing. Thought about what it meant to be the kind of man who turns away 2 women dying of heat in his yard because helping might make his situation worse. He thought about all that in the space it took to breathe in and out. The house, he said, it's not much, but it's got a roof, mostly. Pearl looked at him like waiting for the other shoe. The catch, the condition, the price. When none came, something happened to her face. Not quite a smile. More like memory of what smiling used to feel like. Thank you, she said. Silas helped Opal to her feet. She weighed nothing. 100 pounds of bone and gristle and stubborn refusal to quit. Pearl took her sister's other side, and together they walked 30 yards to the house Silas was about to lose. The door stuck. Always stuck. This time Silas kicked it, which worked about as well as his shoulder. Door gave, with a shriek of wood on wood, and they stumbled into relative cool of interior. Relative being operative. Maybe 95 degrees inside. Compared to 107 outside, it felt almost livable. Opal sank onto the only chair. Pearl hovered next to her, one hand on her sister's shoulder, the other clutching a canvas pack that looked like it had seen better decades. Silas got them more water. When he came back from the pump, they were both drinking in slow, measured sips. The drinking you learn when water is currency and every drop counts. He set the pitcher on the crooked table, pennies still there gleaming dully in light through dust-filmed windows. 47 copper witnesses to his particular species of broke. Neither woman mentioned them. Didn't have to. Pearl looked around the room with eyes cataloging everything. Crooked table, dirt floor, ceiling with growing collection of water stains from leaks that only mattered when it rained, which it hadn't in 14 months. Single window with real glass. Other window covered in oiled cloth. You live here alone? She asked. Just me and the debt, Silas said. He meant it as a joke. Didn't land like one. We can pay, Opal said, voice stronger now. Water doing its work. For the water, for the rest, we have money. Silas looked at their dresses, at the pack holding everything they owned in the world, at their shoes more hope than leather at this point. I'm sure you do, he said, the kindest way to say I don't believe you without calling them liars. Pearl reached into the pack, pulled out a small cloth bag, opened it. Inside, Silas could see dull gleam of coins, not pennies, silver, quarters, half dollars, maybe even a few dollars. More money than Silas had seen in one place since before the bank came calling. We can pay, Pearl said again. We're not beggars. We just need... She stopped, started again. We've been walking 6 days. Every town, every house. Everyone turns us away the second they hear our accent. Okies, they call us. Like we're not people. Like we chose the dust. Like we wanted our farm to turn to nothing and our father to cough himself to death and our mother to... She stopped, closed the bag, put it back with hands shaking worse than Silas has ever had. We just need one night, she finished. One night indoors, away from the sun, away from the men who think two women alone are asking for whatever they want to do. One night of not sleeping with one eye open, wondering if we'll wake up dead. The room was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a bird called. Not a songbird, something harsh and croaking. A crow, probably, or raven. The kind thriving in hard times. Silas thought about what one night would cost him. The scandal, probably. People would talk. They already talked about the veteran living alone at town's edge who never came to church, who sometimes woke screaming from dreams he couldn't explain. Adding two Okie women to the story wouldn't help. But then it couldn't make things much worse. In 72 hours, he wouldn't have a house to gossip about. The roof leaks, he said, 4 places. 4? I've got buckets, but doesn't matter much since it hasn't rained since June of last year. Floor's dirt, gets muddy when wet, dusty when dry. Right now, dusty. South wall window is cloth, not glass, because glass costs money I don't have. Table's crooked, chairs held together with wire and prayer. There's half a loaf of bread planning a career as a brick and some cheese that might be safe if you're not particular about definitions. He paused, looked at them. At 2 women who'd walked 6 days through hell and gotten turned away from every door they'd knocked on. You can stay, he said. I don't want your money. I just want... What did he want? To feel human for once, to do something mattering, to prove Jackson's death left something in the world besides a key opening? Nothing, just come inside before heat gets worse. He finished. Please, Frey. The silence that followed had weight. That silence happening when people recalculate everything they thought they knew about how the world works. Opal made a sound, took Silas a moment to recognize it as a laugh, not big, just small, broken sound of disbelief. You're serious, she said. Terrified, Silas corrected. But yes, also serious. Pearl's eyes were bright, too bright, the brightness coming right before crying or right after. Why, she asked. Fair question. Silas wasn't sure he had fair answer. Because 6 days is too long to walk, he said finally. And because I know what it's like when people pretend you're invisible. And because, he touched the brass key at his chest. Because a friend of mine died 18 years ago, and right before he did, he gave me this, said it opened something important. I've been trying to figure out what that was ever since. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's just the choice to be something other than what the world expects. Pearl reached across the space between them. For a second, Silas thought she was going to take his hand. Instead, she touched the key. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel the warmth of brass, the weight of 18 years carrying it. I'm Pearl Calhoun, she said. This is my sister Opal. We're from Guyman, Oklahoma. Or we were. There's not much Guyman left now, just dust and ghosts. Silas Brennan, Silas said, Bakersfield, California, though not for much longer. Opal's eyes went to pennies on the table, to the eviction notice next to them with its official seal and 3-day warning. How much do you owe? She asked. More than I have, Silas said. True, and also the only answer mattering. They didn't ask for details. He didn't offer. Some things too raw to share with strangers, even strangers you just invited into your dying house. Instead, Silas divided the half loaf of bread into 3 pieces. Distribution wasn't even. He gave the sisters larger portions because they were larger than portions he'd been eating, which was to say barely adequate instead of completely insufficient. The cheese was questionable, but they ate anyway. All 3. Hunger doesn't care about mold. They sat on dirt floor because the chair could only hold one, and none wanted to be the one sitting while others weren't. They ate in silence. Outside, sun hammered down. Inside, heat pressed close like a living thing. When food was gone, Opal spoke. Our father told us about California, she said. Said it was paradise. Orange groves, green fields, work for anyone willing. He made us promise we'd come here if things got bad back home. Things got bad, Pearl added quietly. He died in March, Opal continued. Dust pneumonia. That's what the doctor called it. Like it was real disease instead of just breathing dirt until your lungs filled up and stopped working. Mama tried keeping the farm going. But you can't farm dust, can't plant in dirt that blows away, can't harvest wind. She died in July, Pearl said. Heat. We were outside Needles, Nevada, 114 degrees. She went to sleep in the tent and didn't wake up. We buried her with 20 other people. Migrants, Okies, Americans who'd run out of America to run to. Silas listened. What else could he do? His story was everyone's story in 1936. Different details, same ending. Dust eating the country. Depression eating hope. People like them just trying to survive until survival didn't feel like drowning. Why won't anyone rent to you, he asked, if you have money? The sisters looked at each other. Some conversation happened in that look. Communication twins probably had, speaking without speaking. We have money, Pearl said carefully, from our father. His life insurance. $5,000. Silas's brain stuttered over the number. $5,000, more than his debt, more than he'd seen in his entire life. But here was the question forming in his mind. If they had $5,000, why were they walking? Why turned away? Money opened doors, so why were all the doors still closed? But people hear our accent, Pearl continued, and they decide we're trouble. Okies, migrants, Dust Bowl trash. They see two women alone and they think. She stopped. They think things we'd rather they didn't think. And the ones who don't think those things, Opal added, don't want Okies driving down their property values. Bad enough we're in California. Having us actually living somewhere paying rent, acting like real people, that's too much. Bitterness in her voice was earned. Silas recognized that. He'd heard same bitterness in his own voice often enough. Desertion, Opal said suddenly. That's what people called it back home when we decided to leave. When we took our father's insurance money and ran west instead of staying to watch everything we knew turn to dust. They said we were deserters, cowards, bad daughters. Does it matter, Silas asked, what people called you? Pearl looked at him with those impossible eyes. Does it matter that you're poor, she asked back. No, Silas said. Then it doesn't matter that we're deserters. They finished the water in the pitcher. Silas went to refill it, and when he came back, the sisters were looking at the brass key around his neck with an expression he couldn't quite read. What does it open? Opal asked. Nothing, Silas said. Not anymore. Then why wear it? Good question. Silas had been asking himself that for 18 years. Because it meant something once, he said, to someone who mattered. And maybe he touched it again, that old reflex. Maybe that's enough. Maybe meaning doesn't have to be practical. Maybe it just has to be true. Light outside was fading, not by much. August in California meant sun took its time dying. But shadows were lengthening and killing heat of afternoon was edging toward merely oppressive heat of evening. You should rest, Silas said. I usually sleep behind the curtain there. You can have the main room. It's warmer, but not by much. We can't take your bed, Pearl protested. You're not, Silas said. I'm giving it. There's a difference. He stood up, felt his knees pop, felt familiar ache in his lungs, the souvenir from France that would never quite leave, felt weight of 47 pennies and $4,700 and 72 hours hanging over him like a noose. But he also felt something else, something he didn't have a name for, something uncomfortably close to purpose. Thank you, Pearl said again, like she hadn't already said it, like it bore repeating. Don't, Silas said. I'm not. This isn't. He didn't know how to finish that sentence. Wasn't sure what he was trying to say. It's the first good thing I've done in years, he said finally. That's not charity. That's selfishness. I need to remember what good feels like. He left them there and went behind the curtain dividing his sleeping space from the world. Lay down on thin mattress that was mostly springs and memories. Stared at ceiling with Rhett's water stains and promises of structural failure. Sisters spoke in low voices. He couldn't make out words, but he could hear tone. Exhaustion, relief. Something that might have been hope if hope hadn't gotten beaten out of them somewhere between Oklahoma and here. Then he heard crying, soft, muffled. The crying people do when trying not to be heard. Silas stared at ceiling and thought about Jackson, about the key, about what it meant to carry something opening. Nothing except maybe the space inside yourself where meaning lives. He fell asleep listening to the sound of two women who'd been walking 6 days finally resting. Morning came with the subtlety of someone knowing they're interrupting something important but not caring. Gray light filtered through cloth window and real window with equal lack of enthusiasm. Heat started building before sun cleared horizon. By the time Silas woke, it was already 80 degrees and climbing. He heard movement in the main room. Quiet movement. The quiet meaning people are trying very hard not to wake you. He pushed aside the curtain. Both sisters were awake, packing their canvas bag with practiced efficiency. They tried to clean up, dishes stacked, floor swept with something, probably a piece of cloth from their packs since Silas didn't own a broom. They looked better. Not good, but better. Like sleep and water had done bare minimum to keep them alive for another day. "You're leaving," Silas said. "Not a question." "Before the town wakes up," Pearl confirmed. "Before people see us here. We don't want to make things worse for you." Silas thought about Deputy Wade Palmer, about the eviction notice, about how things couldn't really get worse because worse had a ceiling and he'd already hit it. "You don't have to," he started. "We do," Opal interrupted. "We know how this works. People see Okies at your house, they'll talk. They'll make assumptions. You'll pay for our night here in ways having nothing to do with money." She was right. They all knew she was right. "Where will you go?" Silas asked. Pearl shrugged, gesture so tired it hurt to watch. "East," she said. "Away from here. Maybe Arizona. Maybe New Mexico. Just away. That's all we've got. Away." They shouldered their pack, headed for the door. Silas's hand went to the brass key. 18 years carrying it. 18 years trying to figure out what Jackson had meant, what his father had meant, what it meant to carry something that had lost its practical purpose, but somehow still mattered. "Wait," he said. They turned. Silas pulled the leather cord over his head. Brass key came with it warm from his skin, worn smooth from 18 years of touching it every time he got scared or angry or lost. He held it out to Pearl. "My friend Jackson told me this opened something important," he said. "I've been carrying it since 1918, trying to remember what. Last night I figured it out." Pearl looked at the key, at him, expression unreadable. "It doesn't open doors," Silas continued. "It opens the choice to be different than you're supposed to be. Different than what the world expects. Better than circumstances allow." He pressed the key into her hand. "You're walking away from everything you knew to find something better. That's harder than anything I've ever done. Take it. Remember that even keys opening nothing can mean something. Remember that someone chose kindness once when he had every reason not to." Pearl's hand closed around the key, fingers calloused, work roughened, hands of someone who'd spent their life fighting to survive. "We can't," she started. "You can," Silas said. "That's what the key means. Choosing yes when no would be easier." Opal's eyes were bright again, that too bright coming before crying. "Blood doesn't make you family," she said softly. "But kindness does. We won't forget this." "I know," Silas said. "That's why I'm giving it to you." They left then, two Okie women walking into pre-dawn darkness, heading east, heading away, heading toward whatever their away meant. Silas stood in the doorway of his dying house and watched them disappear into the forest path leading out of town. Watched until they were nothing but shapes in gray light. Watched until they were nothing but the idea of shapes. Watched until they were gone. Then he turned back to his house, to his 47 pennies and his crooked table and his impossible debt. He didn't feel heavier. That was the strange thing. He'd just given away the only thing of value he owned, the only inheritance mattering, and he felt lighter than he had in years. Maybe that was worth half a loaf of bread and a key opening. Nothing. Maybe that was worth everything. 3 days later, Friday, August 5th, at exactly 10:47 a.m., Deputy Wade Palmer knocked on Silas's door with the enthusiasm of someone who enjoys other people's misery professionally. Wade was exactly what a debt collector in a depression looked like. Thin in a way suggesting his body disapproved of his life choices. Perpetual expression like he'd just tasted something disappointing. He carried his leather-bound ledger everywhere, running his finger down columns of numbers with reverence other men reserved for holy texts. "Silas Brennan," he announced as if Silas might have forgotten his own name. "Rent is due, plus last month's unpaid portion, plus interest on said portion. Mr. Montgomery Voss expects full payment by 5 o'clock today." That's, he checked his pocket watch, 6 hours and 13 minutes from now. Silas looked at the pennies still on the table. He'd counted them again this morning. Still spelled not enough in every language mattering. "I don't have it," he said. Simple truth, only kind he had left. Wade made a show of consulting his ledger, though they both knew he'd memorized every debt in town. "That's unfortunate," Wade said. "Mr. Voss has been very patient indeed." He ran his finger down the page counting debts, with lips moving slightly. 3 months behind. At this rate, you'll be owing more than the land is worth." "The land isn't worth anything," Silas pointed out. "Exactly." Wade smiled, smile of someone who'd been waiting to make that exact point. "Which means when you can't pay, Mr. Voss will have to exercise his right to reclaim the property and discharge the debt through other means." Other means meant debtor's work, meant laboring for Montgomery Voss until debt was paid, which given how Voss calculated interest meant forever. I'll find a way, Silas said, knowing it was a lie. I'm sure you will, Wade agreed, knowing it was a lie. He was halfway to the door when he paused. His eyes caught on something, or rather, the absence of something. Didn't you used to wear a key? Wade asked. On a cord. Silas's hand went to his chest automatically. Found nothing. I gave it away, he said. Gave it. Wade's tone suggested this was somehow more offensive than being poor. To whom? Someone who needed it more than I did. Wade made a note in his ledger. Scratch of pen on paper sounded like judgment. Fascinating, he said. A man who can't pay his debts giving away possessions. Mr. Voss will find that very interesting. It was just a key, Silas said. A brass key opening nothing. Then perhaps you should have sold it, Wade said. Every penny counts, Mr. Brennan. You of all people should understand that. He tucked his ledger away with finality. 5 o'clock, he said. Today, Friday. Find the money or find yourself finding new accommodations. Preferably ones that don't leak quite so enthusiastically. He left. Door swung crooked in his wake, letting in heat smelling like August and dust and slow death of everything green. Silas sat down at his crooked table, looked at his 47 pennies, looked at his eviction notice, looked at the space where 2 women had slept 3 nights ago. He thought about Jackson, about the key, about choices not making sense but feeling right anyway. Then he stood up, because sitting wouldn't solve anything. At least standing made him feel like he was doing something, even if that something was just vertical surrender. That's when he heard it. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Multiple sets. Coming up the dirt road from town. His heart did something complicated between hope and terror. He moved to the window. Through dust-filmed glass, he could see them coming. Not 2 figures this time. 6. 2 familiar shapes in the lead wearing the same dust-colored dresses. Behind them 4 more. Older by the look. Carrying tools. Canvas bags. Walking with measured pace of people who'd been walking for a very long time and had stopped caring about arrival, only about the journey. Silas's brain made interesting interpretive choices about what this meant. Most involved being very confused. A few involved being very worried. But then Pearl saw him standing in the doorway and she smiled. Fully smiled, the smile meaning something. Silas Brennan, she called out, voice carrying across the dusty yard. We have a problem. Several problems, Opal added, grinning now too. You're going to hate us, a third voice said. Older woman, gray in her hair vase that had seen enough to stop being impressed by most things. They reached his yard, all 6, turning his struggling piece of property into what probably looked like an invasion to anyone watching from town. We tried to leave, Pearl explained. Walked for 2 days east, made it almost to the county line. And we couldn't stop thinking about this house, Opal continued, about how the roof leaks, how the door doesn't close right, how you gave us everything you had and asked for nothing. The older woman stepped forward. I'm Hattie Roebuck, she said, formerly of Amarillo, Texas, now of nowhere particular. I'm a stonemason, built 47 houses before the dust took them all, before it took everything. She gestured to the others. This is Ezra Flynn, lost his hand in a thresher, but he's the best carpenter I've ever seen. A man in his 30s stepped forward, left sleeve pinned up at the elbow. Right hand held a hammer like it was part of his body. He whistled slightly when he spoke, air escaping through a gap where teeth used to be. Pleased to meet you, Ezra said. And these are Caleb and Gideon Lockhart, Hattie continued. Twin brothers, foundation specialists. If it needs to be level and stay level, they're your men. 2 men who looked identical, same square jaw, same serious eyes, same hands that looked like they'd spent decades working with stone, nodded in unison. The problem, Pearl said, bringing the conversation back, is that we're builders, stonemasons, carpenters, foundation layers. Before we were migrants, before we were refugees, and we can't. She looked at the house, at sagging roof, crooked door, all the small ways poverty had convinced Silas to stop trying. We can't just leave it, she finished. This house, it would drive us mad. So we came back, Opal said, to fix your roof, if you'll let us. Silas stared at them. At 6 migrants standing in his yard offering to fix a house not worth fixing in a situation that couldn't be saved. You can't, he said. The town will see. 6 Okies working here. They'll talk. They'll judge. They'll make it worse for you. For me. For everyone. Let them, Hattie said simply. We've been judged our whole lives. At least now we'll be doing something good while they judge. But I can't pay you, Silas protested. I don't even have enough to save the house. By 5 o'clock today, Montgomery Voss will own it. What's the point of fixing something I'm about to lose? The point, Gideon said quietly, is that it needs fixing. And we know how. We understand if you say no, Caleb added. We do. But we had to ask, his brother finished. Silas looked at his house, at roof leaking in 4 places, at door hanging crooked, at all the small ways poverty had become normal, had become acceptable, had become just the way things were. Then he looked at 6 people who'd walked away from everything they knew, heading toward an away they couldn't name, but who'd stopped in the middle of that journey because a leaking roof bothered them. He thought about Jackson, about the key, about what it meant to choose kindness when kindness was expensive. One condition, he said. They waited. You fix it, Silas continued, but you let me help. I don't know carpentry, I don't know masonry, but I can learn. This is still my house, even if it's falling apart, especially because it's falling apart. I need to be part of fixing it. Hattie grinned, the grin suggesting she'd been hoping he'd say exactly that. Deal, she said, but fair warning, we're excessive when we start fixing things. Doors coming off hinges, windows needing real glass, floors that should be level. We have a problem. We're perfectionists. It's very annoying, Ezra added, his whistle voice making it sound almost musical. Silas found himself laughing, actually laughing. The laugh coming from absurdity colliding with hope and neither one being sure who wins. When do we start? He asked. Now, all 6 said simultaneously. And they did. The hours between noon and 5 o'clock on Friday, August 5th, 1936, were possibly the strangest of Silas Brennan's life. 6 people descended on his dying house with focused intensity, usually reserved for military operations. They treated the repairs like a campaign against time itself. Hattie Roebuck climbed onto the roof before announcing the plan. She moved like someone half her 52 years scrambling up weathered boards, with Grace, speaking of decades, doing exactly this. She stood at the peak, hands on hips, surveying damage with the critical eye of a surgeon examining a patient. This isn't a roof, she announced to the world below. This is optimism with shingles on top, hope with tar paper, a prayer that gravity might take the day off. She looked down at Silas holding the ladder. But we can work with optimism, she said. We've built on worse. And we've got, she checked her pocket watch, 4 hours and 47 minutes. We can patch the worst leaks. Won't be perfect, but it'll be dry. Ezra Flynn handled the door with reverence of a craftsman, understanding every broken thing was a puzzle waiting to be solved. He ran his one hand over warped wood, feeling for the grain, for the places where moisture had done its slow work of destruction. A door should close, he declared, voice whistling through the gap in his teeth. Revolutionary thinking, I know, but trust me on this. He pulled a measuring tape from his belt with practiced efficiency. One-handed, he marked angles and distances with a carpenter's pencil held between his teeth. Then he went to work with saw and plane, shaving away swollen wood, reshaping what time and weather had deformed. Sound of his work was rhythmic, musical almost. Saw plane, whistle of breath through missing teeth providing percussion. Pearl and Opal tackled the windows together. They looked at the cloth one first, then the real glass window, too so covered in dust it might as well have been frosted. This glass is cracked, Pearl said. See 3 places. One good wind and it'll shatter, but we don't have time to replace it today. We can clean it at least, make it so light actually comes through. Caleb and Gideon Lockhart worked on the floor with mathematical precision, suggesting they'd spent previous lives making things very straight and very level. They moved in perfect synchronization the way twins sometimes do. One would measure, the other would cut. One would set the board, the other would nail it down. Every board they placed, they tapped it 3 times with their hammers. Tap, tap, tap. What's that about? Silas asked, watching them work. Caleb looked up, face serious in the way faces get when talking about rituals mattering. One for Dad, he said. One for the dust, Gideon added. One for tomorrow, they said together. They didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Silas understood ritual. He had his own. The brass key he'd touched 1,000 times. The way he'd counted pennies like prayer beads. Small ceremonies people create to make meaning out of chaos. By 2 o'clock, the worst roof leaks were patched. Hattie had worked with speeds, suggesting she knew exactly how much time they had and exactly how to use it. By 3 o'clock, the door closed. Actually closed. For the first time in 3 years, Silas could shut his door without it sticking, scraping, or requiring a kick and a prayer. By 4 o'clock, the floor in the main room was level. Not perfect, they didn't have time for perfect, but level enough that water wouldn't pool in the southwest corner anymore. At 4:30, they all stood in the yard covered in dust and sweat looking at what they'd accomplished in 4.5 hours. It's not done, Hattie said, but it's better. Much better, Ezra agreed, his whistle voice satisfied. Silas looked at the house. His house. It looked different. Not fixed, but fighting, like it had decided to survive a little longer. Thank you, he said. Words were inadequate, microscopic compared to what they meant. Don't thank us yet, Pearl said. She was looking down the road where a cloud of dust was rising. Company's coming. At exactly 5 o'clock, Montgomery Voss arrived. He rode a horse costing more than most people earned in a year. The horse was black, gleaming with health and good feed, and that particular shine coming from being owned by someone who can afford to care. Behind him rode Deputy Wade Palmer, Voss dismounted with careful grace of a man who'd never done hard labor in his life. His suit was pressed despite the heat. His shoes were leather polished, the kind never walking on dirt roads. He was 55 and looked 40. Money did that. Kept you young while poverty aged everyone else. But when he saw 6 Okies standing in Silas's yard tools in hand, his expression changed. Something between surprise and anger flickered across his face. Silas Brennan, he said, voice carrying that particular authority of someone used to being obeyed. I'm here to collect payment. $4,700. Do you have it? No, Silas said simply. Voss pulled out a document, legal paper with seals and signatures. Then by the authority vested in me as primary creditor, I hereby claim this property in satisfaction of— Wait, Pearl said, stepping forward. Voss looked at her like noticing a stain on his shoe. This is a private transaction, he said coldly, between Mr. Brennan and the Bank of Bakersfield. Your presence here is irrelevant, Pearl finished. I know, but I have a question. If someone else paid his debt, would that satisfy the claim? Voss's eyes narrowed. The debt is $4,700. I doubt. That's not what I asked. Would payment from a third party satisfy the legal obligation? Wade Palmer, standing behind Voss, consulted his ledger. Legally, yes, the debt doesn't specify the source of payment. Voss shot Wade a look that could have curdled milk. Technically, Wade added quietly, almost apologetically. We don't have it today, Opal said, stepping next to her sister. But we can get it by Monday. $4,700. Exact. Silas stared at them. You can't. We can, Pearl said, not looking at him, looking at Voss. But we need until Monday. 3 days. Voss considered this. His face went through several calculations. Clearly he wanted the property. But if they actually had the money, he couldn't refuse payment without exposing himself to legal problems. Monday, he said finally. Noon. If you don't have $4,700 exact, the property forfeits immediately. No extensions. No negotiations. He remounted his horse but paused before riding away. And I'll be adding penalties for late payment, he said. Interest compounds daily. By Monday, the debt will be— He pulled out a small notebook, did quick math. $4,820. That's not legal, Wade said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. Deputy Palmer, Voss said, voice dangerously quiet. Are you contradicting me? Wade swallowed hard but stood his ground. California Lending Law, Section 47. Daily compound interest is illegal on debts under 6 months old. Maximum allowable penalty is 2% flat. That's $94. Total debt, Monday, would be $47.94. The silence that followed was enormous. Voss's face turned an interesting shade of purple. We'll have $47.94, Pearl said. Monday, noon. Voss rode away without another word, but his expression promised this wasn't over. Wade lingered for a moment. He looked at Silas, at the 6 migrants, at the house that had somehow gotten better in the past few hours. I've been doing this job 10 years, he said quietly. Collecting debts, evicting families. Telling myself it was just business, just the law. He pulled off his deputy's badge, looked at it. But law should serve justice, not cruelty. He set the badge on the porch railing. Monday noon, be ready, because Voss will try something. He always does. He walked away, leaving the badge behind like a small rebellion. The 7 of them stood in the yard as evening shadows grew long. You can't give me your father's money, Silas said. I won't let you. You can't stop us, Opal replied. Besides, Hattie added, it's not just theirs. We're all in this. Silas looked at her. What do you mean? We talked about it, Hattie said, while you were watching Voss. The 6 of us. We pooled what we have. Between all of us, we've got enough. You don't even know me, Silas protested. You've known me for 5 hours. Long enough, Ezra said, his whistle voice firm. You gave them shelter when they needed it. Gave them your most precious thing, that key. Asked nothing back. That's all we need to know. How much do you have? Silas asked. Total. They exchanged glances. That silent communication. Enough, Pearl said. Just barely enough. If we spend it all. Then you'll have nothing left, Silas said. No money for land, no future, nothing. We'll have this, Gideon said, gesturing at the house. A place. People who chose each other. And purpose, Caleb added. Better than money. Silas felt his throat tighten. 18 years carrying a brass key trying to figure out what it opened. Now he knew. It opened this. The choice. The sacrifice. The kind of family having nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choosing each other when the world said you shouldn't. We should finish the work, Hattie said, breaking the moment with characteristic practicality. We've got 3 days before Monday. Let's make this house worth saving. And so they worked. Not just Friday evening, but Saturday, Sunday, Monday morning. They became a unit. 7 people who'd been strangers a week ago moving like they'd been working together for years. Silas learned. He learned how to patch a roof properly, standing on sun-hot shingles, while Hattie showed him the right way to overlap tar paper the correct angle for nailing so water would run off instead of seeping through. Measure twice, cut once, she said. It was her mantra. She must have said it 100 times. Trust is built slow, lost fast. Same principle. Do it right the first time or you'll be doing it again. He learned how to set a door so it hung true. Watching Ezra work magic with one hand and a collection of tools that looked like they'd been carried through every state between Texas and California. One hand teaches you precision, Ezra said, his whistle voice philosophical. Can't afford wasted motion. Every movement has to count. In carpentry, in life. He learned how to mix mortar that would actually hold stones together instead of just suggesting they might consider staying in place. Caleb and Gideon taught him about ratios: 3 parts sand to 1 part cement. Enough water to make it workable, but not so much it lost its strength. Like life, Caleb said, stirring the mixture. Too dry it crumbles. Too wet it won't hold. Gotta find the balance. The work was hard, harder than anything Silas had done since France. His back screamed. His hands blistered. The blisters popped and new calluses formed underneath. The heat was relentless, 107, 108, 109 by afternoon. Sweat soaked through his shirt in minutes. Dust from the work mixed with dust from the air coating everything in fine grit, getting in your eyes, your mouth, your lungs. But it was good work, purposeful work, the kind leaving you exhausted at day's end but also feeling like you'd accomplished something real. On Saturday evening, as they sat on the newly repaired porch watching the sunset, a small boy appeared at the edge of the property. He couldn't have been more than 6. Small for his age, the way children got when food was scarce. Clothes patched so many times they were more patch than original garment. Bare feet covered in dust, suggesting shoes were a luxury his family couldn't afford. He stood there, one hand shading his eyes, staring at them with unblinking curiosity of the very young. Are you really Okies? He asked Pearl, who was closest. Pearl set down her water cup. Really, truly, she confirmed. Mrs. Ashworth says Okies are dangerous. Pearl smiled, not a happy smile. The smile you make when you've heard the same accusation in 100 different towns and you're tired of defending yourself against it. Mrs. Ashworth, she said carefully, has opinions, strong opinions. We respect her right to have them. Even when they're wrong, the boy asked. Especially when they're wrong. The boy considered this with seriousness of a child trying to understand adult hypocrisy. My house has a leak too, he said finally. A real bad one. Mama puts out 3 buckets when it rains, except it hasn't rained in forever. Opal sat up straighter. Where do you live? The boy pointed down the road toward a cluster of houses, making Silas's place look almost prosperous by comparison. The poorest part of town. The place where migrants and day laborers and people hanging on by their fingernails all ended up. What's your name? Pearl asked. Tommy, the boy said. Tommy Wilson. Mama Sarah Wilson. We live in the blue house. Well, it used to be blue. Now it's mostly gray. We'll look at it, Opal said, when we finish here. If your mama says it's okay. Tommy's eyes went wide. Really? Really, truly. He ran off, kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. They could hear him shouting before he was even out of earshot. Mama, mama, the Okies gonna fix our roof. The silence that followed was thoughtful. We don't have materials for more houses, Caleb said quietly. Or time, Gideon added. We've got to have the money ready by Monday noon. We'll go to the bank Monday morning, Pearl said. Withdraw what we need. That leaves Sunday afternoon and Monday morning for Tommy's house. If his mother agrees, Hattie said. Sunday morning, Sarah Wilson came to see them. She was maybe 30, but looked 50. Hard years written in lines around her eyes, permanent slouch of her shoulders, the way her hands never quite stopped shaking. Tommy held her hand looking up at her with the desperate hope of a child who'd asked for something impossible and was terrified of hearing no. My son says you'll fix our roof, Sarah said, voice flat, like she'd learned not to hope. I can't pay. I barely have. Did we ask for payment? Hattie interrupted. Not unkindly, but firmly. We're fixing a roof, your roof, because it needs fixing and we know how. That's the whole transaction. Sarah's eyes filled. She turned away quickly, but not quick enough to hide it. Why? She asked, voice breaking. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Because someone helped us, Pearl said. She touched the brass key hanging from her neck. When we had nothing. When everyone else turned us away. Someone chose kindness. We're choosing the same. They fixed Sarah Wilson's roof Sunday afternoon. Would have been half a day, but there was more damage than expected. Wood rot, water damage extending into the joists, structural problems that would have collapsed the whole thing in another year. This is bad, Caleb said, showing Silas the rotted beam. See how soft you can push your thumb through it. That's not holding weight. That's holding a prayer. They replaced the beam, replaced 3 joists, re-shingled the entire south side. By evening, Sarah Wilson's house had a roof that would last another decade. She tried to pay them with eggs. 6 eggs from the 2 chickens she was keeping alive on table scraps and stubbornness. We can't take, Pearl started. You can, Sarah interrupted. You will. A woman has her pride. I can't pay money, but I can pay eggs. Let me have this. They took the eggs. That night, Sunday night, their last night before Monday's reckoning, scrambled eggs for 7 people tasted better than anything Silas had eaten in years. They were sitting around the table afterward when Silas noticed something. Hattie was coughing. Not the dust cough everyone had, something deeper, wetter. You all right? He asked. She waved him off. 52 years old, worked in heat all my life. I'll be fine. But her hands shook when she lifted her water cup. And Silas noticed she'd lost weight. 3 days of giving her food portions to others, working 12-hour days in 100-degree heat. He made a mental note to watch her closer. He should have watched closer. Monday morning arrived too fast and too slow. They left for the bank at 9 o'clock, all 7 of them walking together down Main Street like a small parade. People stared, some with curiosity, some with hostility, most with the studied indifference of people pretending not to see what made them uncomfortable. The Bank of Bakersfield was a 2-story brick building that had been built during flush times and never quite lived up to its promise. Inside, it smelled like ink and old paper and the particular aroma of money being counted. Pearl and Opal went to the teller's window. The rest waited by the door. We'd like to withdraw funds, Pearl said, from our account. The teller, a young man with spectacles and a nervous manner, looked at them with barely concealed distaste. Name, he asked. Calhoun. Pearl and Opal Calhoun. He checked his ledger, frowned, checked again. You have, he looked up, surprise breaking through his professional mask. You have $5,000 deposited. 4,794, Pearl corrected. We need to withdraw that exact amount. The teller consulted with someone in the back. Came back looking uncomfortable. Mr. Voss has left instructions that large withdrawals require his personal approval. Is Mr. Voss here? Opal asked. The teller checked his watch. He'll be here at noon for the property transaction. Then we'll wait, Pearl said. They waited, all 7 of them, sitting on the benches in the bank lobby, not talking, just waiting. Other customers came and went. Some stared, some whispered. One woman made a point of moving to a different bench as if poverty and dust might be contagious. At 11:30, Montgomery Voss arrived. He saw them immediately. His expression flickered surprise, then calculation, then something almost like respect. Miss Calhoun, he said, approaching them, I understand you wish to make a withdrawal. $4,794, Pearl confirmed, to pay Silas Brennan's debt. Voss's jaw tightened. That's an unusual amount. Very specific. It's what he owes, Opal said, including the legal 2% penalty Deputy Palmer mentioned. Former Deputy Palmer, Voss corrected. He no longer works for this bank or this town. But he gestured to the teller, who disappeared into the back room. 10 minutes of tense silence. Then the teller returned with a cloth bag. $4,794, he announced. Counted and verified. Pearl took the bag. It was heavy. The weight of everything they had, everything their father had left them, everything they'd saved for their future. She handed it to Silas. No, Silas said. I can't. You can, Pearl said. You already gave us something more valuable than money. You gave us hope. You showed us that kindness still exists. That's worth more than 40 acres in Oregon. She pressed the bag into his hands. This is our choice, Opal added. Family helps family. At exactly noon, they stood in the bank lobby. Voss sat at his desk. Wade Palmer, no longer in uniform but present anyway, stood witness. Silas poured the money onto Voss's desk. Bills and coins in a cascade of everything that mattered. Count it, Johan said. Voss counted. It took him 7 minutes. The bank lobby was absolutely silent. Finally, he looked up. $4,794, he said. Exact. He pulled out a receipt book. Wrote paid in full with sharp, angry strokes. Thrust it at Silas. The property is yours, he said. Clear title. But before they could leave, Voss stood. There's one more thing, he said. His voice carried across the bank. A matter of town ordinance, number 47, prohibits transient workers from residing within city limits. These 6, he gestured at the migrants. They have 24 hours to leave Bakersfield. If they're found within city limits after that, they'll be arrested for vagrancy. Pearl stepped forward. This property isn't in city limits. We checked. It's outside the boundary by 40 feet. Voss smiled. It wasn't friendly. Then I'll have the boundary extended, he said. Emergency town council meeting. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. We'll see how your friends fare when it's put to a vote. That night, the 7 of them held a council of their own in Silas's house, their house now somehow. Bought with everything they had, saved from nothing, built on choices that didn't make practical sense but felt right anyway. He'll extend the boundary, Caleb said. Make it so the house falls inside city limits, then enforce Ordinance 47. Can he do that? Silas asked. He owns 3 of the 5 council members, Wade Palmer said. They all jumped. Wade stood in the doorway, hands raised in a gesture of peace. I'm not here to arrest anyone, he said quickly. I'm here to warn you. Voss is calling an emergency session for tomorrow. He's got 3 votes locked. Needs 1 more for a majority. He'll get it from Councilman Pierce. Pierce owes him money. Why are you telling us? Opal asked suspiciously. Wade looked uncomfortable. Because I've been collecting debts for Voss for 10 years. I've watched him ruin good people, destroy families, take everything from folks who had nothing to begin with. He gestured at the fixed house at the work they'd done. You people, you've done more good in a week than Voss has done in 20 years. Fixed houses, helped neighbors, didn't ask for anything back. I won't be the one who runs you out. He walked to the porch railing where he'd left his badge 3 days ago, picked it up, looked at it. If Voss wants you gone, he'll have to do it himself, Wade said. Then he dropped the badge in the dirt and walked away. We need to be at that council meeting, Hattie said. Make our case. Voss owns the council, Ezra pointed out. What case can we make? Pearl touched the brass key hanging from Silas's neck. He'd insisted she return it, but she'd insisted he keep it. Some argument about it belonging where it started. Compromise was that they'd share it, take turns. The truth, Pearl said, that's all we've got. The truth and hope that it matters. But as Silas looked around at their faces, faces of people who'd given everything they had to save his farm, to fix his house, to choose kindness, when cruelty would have been easier, he wondered what truth could stand against money and power and ordinances written by people who'd never had to sleep in the heat or walk 6 days looking for shelter. Tuesday morning, August 9th, arrived with the same relentless heat that marked every August day in 1936. The town council met in the municipal building, a 1-story structure, $2,000 for a town Bakersfield size, but built during flush times and never quite living up to its promise. By the time 9 o'clock arrived, the building was packed. Seemed like half of Bakersfield had turned out. Sarah Wilson was there with Tommy. 3 other families from the poor district families whose houses they'd looked at but hadn't had time to fix yet. They stood in the back, quiet but present. And in the front row, unexpectedly, sat Cordelia Ashworth. The council sat at a long table at the front. 5 men, all over 50, all wearing their best suits despite the heat. Montgomery Voss sat in the center. Chairman by default, by money, by power, that went unquestioned. This emergency session is called to order, Voss announced. Item 1, extension of city limits to include the property at 42 Harper Road, currently owned by Silas Brennan. Objection, a voice from the side. Everyone turned. Cordelia Ashworth stood holding a book. Robert's Rules of Order, she said, holding it up. Allow for public comment during emergency sessions. I invoke the right to speak as a resident and taxpayer of 38 years. Voss looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Mrs. Ashworth, how unexpected. I'm sure it is, Cordelia said dryly. I move that we hear public testimony before voting. Second, Councilman Richards said, the youngest of the five at 48. Voss couldn't refuse without looking like a tyrant. Fine, 5 minutes. Make it quick. Cordelia walked to the front, set down her book, Robert's Rules, thick and official looking. Gentlemen, she said, I've lived in Bakersfield for 40 years, raised 3 sons here, buried 2 in the Great War, lost 1 to dust pneumonia last year. I've seen this town through good times and bad, mostly bad lately. She looked directly at Voss. I've also seen you, Montgomery, buy up farms and homes and businesses from people who couldn't pay. Watched you profit from their misery. I've told myself it was just business, just the way things work. Her voice hardened. But I was wrong, and I've been a fool. She turned to face the crowd. Last week, 6 migrants came to Bakersfield. Okies, we called them. Like that made them less than human. Like drought and dust were character flaws instead of disasters. She pointed at the crew standing together near the back. Those 6 people fixed Silas Brennan's house, fixed Sarah Wilson's roof, and she paused. They fixed my front step. Murmurs from the crowd. 3 days ago, Cordelia continued, I came home and found that woman, she pointed at Pearl, on her knees on my property, replacing my rotted front step. The step I'd been too proud to ask for help with, too stubborn to admit I couldn't fix myself. Her voice cracked. I cursed her, called her vermin, told her to leave my property. And do you know what she said? Silence. She said, that's okay, ma'am. The step doesn't care who we are. It just cares about not being broken. Cordelia walked to where Pearl stood. Then she finished the job. Didn't ask for payment, didn't ask for thanks, just fixed it and left. She looked back at the council. If we expel these people, we're not protecting Bakersfield. We're admitting we're too small, too scared, too broken to accept help when it's offered freely. She sat down. The silence was enormous. Then Sarah Wilson stood up, Tommy clutching her hand. They fixed our roof, she said simply. My boy sleeps dry now. First time in 2 years. I couldn't pay them. They didn't care. Her voice broke. That's what we're supposed to be. People who help each other. The Patterson family stood, the Morales children. One by one, every family whose lives had been touched. They gave us hope. They worked for nothing. They're better neighbors than most of us deserve. They chose kindness. Voss tried to speak over them, but the voices kept coming. Testimonies piling up like evidence. Like truth that couldn't be shouted down. Finally, he slammed his gavel. Enough, he roared. This is about law, about order, about maintaining standards. About maintaining your power, Wade Palmer said, standing into the back. Mr. Palmer, Voss said dangerously, you no longer have standing in this community. Then neither do you, Wade replied. I've worked for you for 10 years, collected debts, evicted families, told myself it was justice. But watching these people, watching them give everything they had to help a stranger, that showed me what actual justice looks like. He walked forward, stood next to Cordelia. I'm done being your enforcer. The council was murmuring now. Richards looked uncomfortable. Another councilman, Davis, was whispering to his neighbor. We need to vote, Richards said suddenly. I moved to table the boundary extension indefinitely. Second, Davis added. You can't, Voss started. All in favor, Richards said, ignoring him. 3 hands went up. Richards, Davis, and a third councilman, Silas, didn't know. Motion passes, Richards announced. 3-2. The boundary stays where it is. Voss's face went purple. This isn't over. Yes, Cordelia said quietly. It is. And it should have been. But as they left the municipal building in a daze, victory tasting strange, like something you weren't sure you deserved, but were grateful to have. Anyway, Silas noticed something. Hattie was leaning heavily on Ezra's arm. Her face was gray. Sweat poured off her despite the relatively cool morning. Hattie, Pearl said, concern sharp in her voice. I'm fine, Hattie said. Just tired. It's been a long week. But she wasn't fine. They were halfway back to the house when it happened. Not a trip, a collapse. Her legs gave out, body folding, like someone had cut the strings. Ezra caught her barely. They both went down, Hattie in his arms, breathing in short, shallow gasps. Water, Pearl said urgently. She needs... Not water, Hattie wheezed. Too late for water. Her face was gray. Sweat poured off her. Her eyes were unfocused. Heat stroke. The killer stalking them all summer. The invisible enemy taking people when they pushed too hard, worked too long, gave too much. They carried her to the house, laid her on the bed in the main room, tried to cool her with wet cloths with shade with desperate prayer. But her pulse was thready, breathing shallow, skin burning with fever, having nothing to do with infection and everything to do with a body that had given everything it had until there was nothing left. Silas remembered the signs now, remembered from the past week, the coughing, the weight loss, the way she'd given her food portions to Tommy, to Sarah, to anyone who looked hungrier than she was. 3 weeks of working 14-hour days in 100-degree heat. 3 weeks of putting everyone else first. 3 weeks of slowly dying while fixing other people's houses. Hattie, Opal whispered, holding the old woman's hand, "Stay with us, please." Hattie's eyes opened, focused with effort. "Measure twice," she said, voice barely audible. "Cut once, build it right, make it last." She looked at each of them. "I built 47 houses in Texas. Dust took them all. But these," her hand moved weakly, gesturing to the world beyond the walls. "These will stand, these matter." "Don't talk," Pearl said, tears streaming. "Save your strength." "For what?" Hattie smiled. "It was peaceful. I'm done. I built my last house, helped my last family. That's," she coughed, "that's enough. That's everything." Her eyes found Silas. "Your father's key," she said, "opens the choice to give when you have nothing. I had nothing. Gave everything, no regrets." Her breathing changed, slowed, each breath taking longer to arrive. "Take care of," she started. She never finished. Hattie Roebuck died at 10:47 a.m. on Tuesday, August 9th, 1936, in a house she'd helped rebuild, surrounded by family. She'd chosen, having given everything she had to people she'd known for 1 week. She was 52 years old. They buried her on Wednesday, August 10th, in the Bakersfield Cemetery in a plot donated by Councilman Richards. The funeral was supposed to be small, just the 6 survivors and a few close neighbors. But word spread the way it spreads in small towns, and by the time the service started, there were 60 people gathered around the grave. Cordelia Ashworth was there wearing black. So was Wade Palmer, Sarah Wilson, and Tommy. Every person whose house had been touched, whose life had been changed, whose world had been made slightly less broken. Silas gave the eulogy. He'd spent all night writing it, crossing out words, starting over, trying to find language matching what Hattie had meant. In the end, he kept it simple. "Hattie Roebuck built 47 houses in Texas," he said, "lost them all to dust. Built 2 more here in Bakersfield, mine and Sarah Wilson's. Those will stand for 100 years. He looked at the gathered crowd. "But her real legacy isn't in roofs and walls. It's in teaching us that the measure of a life isn't what you keep. It's what you give when you have nothing left to give." He touched the brass key at his chest. She gave everything, asked for nothing. And somehow in doing that, she built something that'll outlast all the houses she ever made. She built family. She built hope. She built proof that kindness matters more than money, that people matter more than property, that choosing to help when help costs you everything, that's what it means to be human. His voice broke. Hattie Roebuck died with nothing, and she died with everything that matters. They lowered her into the ground. The earth of California that she'd never owned but had made better just by being there. As people filed away, Cordelia approached Silas. "I'm sorry," she said, "for my prejudice, for my blindness, for everything I said and thought and believed that was wrong." "She forgave you before you apologized," Silas said. "That's who she was." Cordelia nodded, paused. Then, "I have a proposal. The town council. We need a new member to replace Voss." "Voss resigned," Silas asked, surprised. "Was asked to resign," Cordelia corrected. "After we discovered certain irregularities in how he'd been calculating interest on debts. Turns out he's been breaking California lending law for years. Wade Palmer found the evidence." She looked at Pearl. "The council suggested you. First woman on the Bakersfield Council, if you'll do it." Pearl looked shocked. "I'm an Okie. You're exactly what we need," Cordelia interrupted. "Someone who builds instead of tears down. Someone who gives instead of takes. Someone who, she smiled. "Someone who fixes steps without being asked." Pearl looked at Opal, at the crew, at Silas. "On one condition," she said, "that we use the position to help people. Really help. Not just laws and ordinances. Actual physical help." "That's what councils are supposed to do," Cordelia said. "We've just forgotten." Pearl accepted. The years passed, not quickly, not easily, but they passed. By 1937, the crew had expanded. They'd formed an official business, Roebuck and Associates Construction, in Hattie's memory and taken on apprentices. Young people from the poor district who wanted to learn trades but couldn't afford formal training. By 1938, they'd fixed 23 houses in Bakersfield's poor district. By 1940, Pearl was the longest-serving member of the town council. She'd pushed through ordinances for public housing worker protections, assistance programs for migrants still fleeing the Dust Bowl. Opal had opened an auto repair garage, first female-owned shop in Kern County. She specialized in fixing vehicles for people who couldn't afford regular mechanics. By 1942, when America entered the war, Caleb and Gideon enlisted. They came back in 1945, both alive, both changed, both ready to build again. Ezra adopted 2 orphans from the migrant camps, a boy and a girl who'd lost their parents to dust pneumonia. He taught them carpentry. The boy grown would go on to build low-income housing across California. Silas never married, never found the need. The crew was his family. The house, their house, now expanded and rebuilt, and Solid was full enough. By 1946, on a September morning, finally cool after a decade of drought, Roebuck and Associates had built exactly 47 houses, the same number Hattie had built in Texas. They'd done it deliberately, choosing the number as memorial, as promise, as proof that what she'd started hadn't died with her. In September 1946, the town of Bakersfield held a dedication ceremony. They'd commissioned a plaque, bronze, expensive, mounted in the town hall where everyone would see it. The brass key, Silas's key, Jackson's key, the key that had started everything, was encased in glass next to the plaque. The inscription read, "Given by Silas Brennan to Pearl Calhoun, August 1936. Returned by Pearl Calhoun to Silas Brennan, August 1936. This key opens nothing and everything." In memory of Hattie Roebuck, 1884 to 1936, who measured twice, cut once, and built a legacy that outlasted the dust. Below that, in smaller letters, blood makes you kin, choice makes you family, kindness makes you home. The ceremony was attended by the original crew, Pearl, Opal, Silas, Ezra, Caleb, Gideon, and their families. Pearl had married a mechanic from Fresno. They had 2 daughters. Opal had married a teacher. They had 3 sons. All Ira's adopted children were there, now grown. The Lockhart twins each had families of their own. 200 people attended. The entire town, it seemed, including Cordelia Ashworth, now in her 70s, who'd become one of the crew's biggest supporters. Including Wade Palmer, who'd become Bakersfield sheriff after Voss's resignation and who'd spent a decade enforcing laws that helped instead of hurt. Including Sarah Wilson and Tommy, now 18, about to leave for college on a scholarship Pearl had helped him get. They dedicated the plaque. They said words about Hattie, about sacrifice, about what it meant to choose kindness, and then they went home. But the story doesn't end there. Because 41 years later, in 1987, an old man sat on a porch that didn't leak, telling his grandson a story he'd never told anyone. Silas Brennan was 80 years old. His hands shook worse than they had in France. His lungs still carried scars from gas attacks that happened 69 years ago. But his mind was sharp and his memory was clear. His grandson Michael, age 12, sat next to him, listening with wide-eyed attention children give to stories that matter. The house around them was solid. The roof didn't leak. The door closed properly. The floor was level. 51 years after 6 Okies had shown up with tools and hope and nothing else. "Why didn't you tell anyone for 50 years, Grandpa?" Michael asked when the story was done. Silas touched the space on his chest where the brass key used to hang. It was in the town hall now, behind glass, but he could still feel the weight of it like it was around his neck. "Some things are too sacred to share until you're sure people will understand," he said. "The key taught me something, taught all of us something." "What?" "That kindness isn't a transaction, it's a covenant you give without expecting return." But somehow, his voice caught with emotion, somehow it always comes back. He gestured at the house, at the town beyond, at the 47 houses still standing solid and true, built by people who'd given everything they had to help strangers. "Hattie died with nothing," he said. "No money, no land, no possessions. But she died rich in all the ways that matter. She was loved. She was remembered, and the good she did." He smiled. "The good she did is still here, still helping people. The houses we built trained apprentices. Those apprentices trained others. There's a lineage of kindness going back to 6 Okies who decided to fix a leaking roof instead of walking away." Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Can I see it?" he asked. "The key at tomorrow," Silas promised. We'll go to the town hall. You can see it. Read the inscription. Remember that your grandfather learned the most important lesson of his life from a piece of brass opening. Nothing except the choice to be better than circumstances allowed. The sun set over Bakersfield. The heat of August had finally, after decades, given way to seasons making sense. The Dust Bowl was history now. The Depression was memory. The people who'd suffered through both were dying off, taking their stories with them. But some stories remained, told and retold, passed down from grandparents to grandchildren, preserved in bronze plaques and glass cases in houses standing solid against time. Silas Brennan died in his sleep 3 months later in January 1988 at age 80. His obituary mentioned his service in World War I, his decades farming in Bakersfield, his work with Roebuck and Associates Construction Company. But it didn't mention the key, didn't mention the covenant, didn't mention the choice that changed everything. Some things are too sacred for obituaries. Some things live in bronze plaques and remembered stories in houses that don't leak. Some things are too important to die. The brass key still hangs in the Bakersfield Town Hall. Every year on August 9th, the anniversary of Hattie Roebuck's death, the crew's descendants gather. They read the inscription. They tell the story. They remember. And in doing so, they keep the covenant alive. The covenant saying kindness matters. Choice matters. Family is what you make, not what you're born into. And sometimes a key opening, nothing can open everything.